June 5, 1976. Eastern Idaho. The Snake River Plain stretches for miles under a pale morning sky. The Teton River, tamed for years by one of the largest earthen dams ever built by the U.S. government, glitters below. Farmers have already begun their morning routines. Ranchers are moving cattle. Families are eating breakfast. Nobody knows that within hours, 11 billion gallons of water are about to be set loose on their homes, their fields, and their lives. And it started with a leak. To understand why the dam failed, you have to understand why it was built. The Teton River Valley in eastern Idaho was agricultural gold, rich soil, reliable seasons. But the water? Unpredictable. Farmers needed irrigation. Politicians wanted power. The solution, as it so often was in mid-century America, was a dam. In 1963, the Bureau of Reclamation proposed the Teton Dam, a massive earthen structure nearly 300 feet tall, stretching 3,100 feet across a volcanic canyon carved by the Teton River. It would hold back 17 miles of reservoir. It would water 100,000 acres of farmland. It would make the desert bloom. But from the very beginning, there were warnings. Geologists flagged the canyon walls as porous volcanic rock, rhyolite, riddled with fractures and joints, ideal pathways for water to escape a dam's foundation. The Bureau of Reclamation waved the concerns aside. They had built bigger dams. They had faced harder terrain. They knew what they were doing, or so they believed. Construction began in 1972. By 1975, the dam was essentially complete. Workers were proud. Officials were confident. And downstream, in the towns of Rexburg, Sugar City, and Roberts, people went on with their lives, trusting that the government had done its job. The Bureau of Reclamation built over 600 dams in the American West. Their confidence was legendary. Their safety record, mostly clean. But for the Teton Dam, warning signs emerged before the concrete had even fully cured. As early as 1972, geologist Dr. Harold Bailey with the U.S. Geological Survey raised alarm. The canyon walls, he noted, were composed of rhyolite, volcanic rock honeycombed with cracks and voids. The earth used to fill the dam was the same porous volcanic soil pulled from nearby hillsides. Water, he argued, would find pathways. It always did. His report was reviewed. His concerns were noted. And then, the project moved forward. In the years that followed, during the filling of the reservoir in 1975 and 1976, inspectors noted something else: wet spots, seeps, small trickles emerging from the base of the dam. This phenomenon, called piping, is one of the most dangerous failure modes for an earthen dam. Water moving through the soil carries particles with it. Over time, it carves invisible tunnels. The dam begins to hollow out from the inside. On June 3, 1976, workers reported seepage. On June 4th, seepage intensified. On June 5th, the dam inspector arrived at 7 a.m. and immediately radioed his supervisors. The hole was growing. 7 a.m., June 5th, 1976. Bureau of Reclamation Inspector Delbert Voss arrives at the dam for a routine check. What he finds is anything but routine. A seep on the downstream face of the dam has grown overnight. Water is trickling through the embankment roughly 130 feet below the dam's crest. Voss calls his supervisors. The response is not panic. It is procedure. Get equipment up there. Fill the hole. By 7:30, bulldozers are dispatched to push compacted earth into the seep. But something is wrong. The seep is getting worse, not better. The water is dark, muddy, which means the dam itself is eroding from the inside. By 9 a.m., the hole has grown from a seep to a stream. Workers are warned to move back. At 9:30, a large section of the embankment suddenly caves in. The stream becomes a waterfall. The bulldozers still on the embankment are swallowed. Just gone. At this point, there is nothing left to do but warn the valley below. At approximately 11 a.m., the dam's crest collapses. 11 billion gallons of water, a man-made inland sea, begins its journey downstream. The flood moved at between 17 and 23 miles per hour, faster than most people could run. It was not a gentle rising of water. It was a wall. The first communities to be hit were the small towns and farms immediately downstream of the dam. The floodwaters funneled through the narrow canyon and then exploded outward onto the Snake River Plain with terrifying force. Rexburg, Idaho, population 8,000, took a direct hit. By the time the water arrived, emergency sirens had been blaring for over an hour. Most residents had managed to flee. Most, but not all. I heard the sirens and thought it was a fire drill. My husband said, "No, this is real." We grabbed our kids and ran to the roof of the church. We could hear the water before we could see it. It sounded like a freight train. The flood crested in Rexburg at nearly 11 feet above street level. Buildings that had stood for a century were torn from their foundations. The floors of homes peeled away. Livestock drowned by the thousands. Sugar City was largely destroyed, nearly every structure lost. Downstream, the water spread across 300 square miles of farmland, depositing feet of mud and silt on some of the most productive agricultural land in Idaho. 11 people died. The final death toll was remarkably low, a testament to the emergency response in the hours before the dam failed. But the destruction was staggering. Over 4,000 homes damaged or destroyed. 25,000 people displaced. Agricultural losses exceeding $400 million in 1976 dollars. When the water finally pulled back, what remained was not recognizable as the valley that had existed 48 hours before. Rexburg and the surrounding communities were buried under layers of sediment, in some places several feet deep. The smell, survivors say, was unforgettable. A combination of river mud, livestock, ruptured fuel tanks, and sewage. The kind of smell that gets into your memory and doesn't leave. Cleanup would take months. Rebuilding years. The U.S. government eventually paid out over $300 million in claims, one of the largest disaster restitution programs in American history at that time. But for many residents, the money was never the point. The point was accountability. Investigations began almost immediately. The Interior Department commissioned an independent review panel. Their conclusion, published in 1977, was unsparing. The dam failed due to flaws in design. Specifically, the failure to adequately seal the porous volcanic foundation. The Bureau of Reclamation had known the rock was fractured. They had known seepage was a risk. They had proceeded anyway. The Bureau did not dispute the finding. Commissioner Gilbert Stam resigned, but no criminal charges were ever filed. No individual was ever prosecuted for the 11 deaths. Why did the Teton Dam fail? The short answer is piping. The long answer is a cascade of decisions, each one reasonable on its own, that together created a catastrophic outcome. The dam was an earth-filled structure, essentially a massive compacted mound of soil and rock. At its core was a thin, clay-rich zone called the impervious zone, meant to block water from passing through. Around it, zoned layers of fill material were supposed to provide structural support. The fatal flaw was in the key trench, a slot cut into the canyon floor designed to anchor the dam to bedrock and block seepage. But the canyon rock was volcanic rhyolite, fractured, jointed, porous. No grout curtain, a common waterproofing technique, was used in the upper key trench, and the impervious core was allowed to directly contact cracked rock without adequate filtration layers to catch eroding particles. When the reservoir filled and water pressure built up, it found its path through the cracks, through the joints, through the voids in the volcanic rock beneath and beside the dam. It began carrying soil particles with it. The piping began. The independent review panel identified 3 critical design errors: inadequate grout treatment of the foundation, failure to design a proper downstream filter zone, and insufficient seepage analysis for the specific geological conditions. Any one of these, addressed, might have prevented the disaster. Together, they made it inevitable. The Teton Dam disaster became a landmark case study in geotechnical engineering, taught in universities for decades as the definitive example of what happens when institutional confidence overrides technical caution. In the years following the Teton Dam collapse, the United States fundamentally changed how it regulates dams. Congress passed the National Dam Safety Program in 1979, requiring systematic inspection of all federally owned and regulated dams. States developed their own dam safety programs. Engineering standards were updated, particularly around seepage analysis and filter design. A profession woke up to its own complacency. In the Teton Valley itself, the dam was never rebuilt. The reservoir was never refilled. Today, the remains of the dam's abutments, the wing walls on either side of the canyon, still stand. Visitors can walk to them, touch the concrete, look at the canyon below. The Teton River, freed from its impoundment, has largely restored itself. The valley, which once fed millions in irrigation water, adapted to other water sources. The farming communities survived. But the deeper question the Teton Dam raises has never fully been answered. How much do we trust the institutions we build our lives around? When an engineer raises a red flag and is overruled, what recourse does the public have? When the government builds a dam on cracked volcanic rock and calls it safe, who holds the line? 11 people died in the Teton Dam flood. But another version of that story, one where the warnings were heeded, where the design was corrected, where the question, what if we're wrong, was asked out loud, ends very differently. That version exists only as a road not taken. The Teton Dam collapse is not just the story of 11 billion gallons of water. It is the story of 11 billion choices, small, procedural, bureaucratic choices, that together moved a mountain of earth into a river and called it progress. In memory of the 11 lives lost, June 5, 1976.